Welcome back to All the Shit. This is Tom.
And Will. And today, we're talking about Bo. You know Bo.
Bo knows Bo.
Bo is your bro.
Bo knows fishing. Bo knows surgery. Bo knows...
being a well-adjusted individual.
This is a friend of mine from Denver. I've known him for at least 8 years. All around great guy.
This is another person I would love to sit down and have a beer or coffee with. I love his outlook and his perspective on life. And, you know, the way he was brought up, I think there's something about that has kind of led him to where he is in his life.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we'll talk a lot in this conversation about how he was raised and the circumstances through which he found himself ultimately getting into med school and becoming a specialist in orthopedic surgery. This guy is one of the most humble human beings I've ever met, one of the most generous people I've ever met.
In a lot of ways, who he is, what he's about, and how he got where he is the quintessential American dream, right? That we've talked about being potentially dead.
Yeah, and he actually says the way he was raised and the things he saw and ultimately the way he got to where he is proved to him that if you want something, it's still there for you to go get.
Yeah. So stop bitching, get off your ass, and go get it.
It's Bo time.
Bo time, baby.
Hello? Is anybody out there? Welcome to All the Shit with Tom and Will.
What's going on,
What's
sir?
up, Bo? Dude, it's good to see you. You lost all your hair.
I did. It was time, you know. I've existed in the short-haired world for so long. I enjoyed my long hair, but I think this is going to be the durable future just because it's so easy and fuck, I just don't care.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Last time I saw you, you were about half inch away from hitchhiking your way to California to live out your days on the street there.
For sure. Graduate student at Berkeley style.
Are you home now? Are you in the basement at your house?
Yeah.
So you got the day off today or what?
I do. Ran around, did a bunch of shit, just catching up on like physical therapy. Dogs went to the vet, just standard stuff, because we spend so much time on the weekends up in the mountains that like everything just kind of piles in many times on these days where I'm basically just kind of trying to make it, you know, tasks, throw everything together, do some laundry, boom, go to work tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, yeah, totally, dude. I think I'm on chapter 3 of your book, but I'm getting there.
Hey, man, by the time
yeah.
you have time to get into that, I'll have the audiobook version ready for you, and you can just listen to it.
Nice. Yeah, on the drive up to the cabin.
Yeah, this is not a prerequisite at all for this conversation, but ultimately what came out of that book, and I'll just give you the brief backstory to kind of explain why I'm doing what I'm doing. I sent that book to, 10 guys in the editing phase after I wrote the first draft, just to make sure that I was on track. I didn't miss anything egregious. And everyone who responded also sent back like a very personal story about either their relationship with their father, their relationship with their son, something they wish they'd known. That surprised me. Like I thought, I'm writing this book for kids. It's like, as an adult, read this and tell me, is there anything I'm missing? But what I'm learning is that I think most of us grow up and still have a lot of those holes in our life. And we just don't think about them as much as, because like you said, we're always running around doing this, that. There's so much. Adulting is hard. And when you don't put the emphasis on dedicating time to look inward and think about your life and how you're doing personally, you lose track of it until something comes along and kickstarts it and it sparks something else up in you. So this conversation really is just my buddy Will and I, we've had these conversations for 5 years, but it never ceases to amaze me how many guys don't have close relationships or anyone they can truly be themselves around. You know what I mean?
100%.
And so that's kind of the gist of this, is just to talk to as many guys as I can, learn what I can from lessons learned in your life, and then pass that on to someone who's listening and is trying to figure out, how the fuck do I do any of this?
Perfect insight. The more I am around, the less I am certain of some prior convictions. And I think taking that time to look inward is so critical to understand yourself, to know yourself a little better, and to continuously adapt that like lens to your life, because it is so pressure packed. And If you just focus on one goal to the next, at one moment you're a high schooler in central New Jersey, and the next minute you're an orthopedic surgeon in Denver. And I don't know if I could recount every second of, the time frame in between, but, I know I've changed a lot personally. I know it's taken a lot to get here. And I think I will be the first to admit I probably don't think about my progress as much as I should for sake of just getting to that next stage, goal, accomplishment, task.
Yeah, just that next breath of air in some cases, right?
Yeah, it's nonstop. It's nonstop.
So just to set the stage a little bit, you and I have known each other for, man, I don't know, it's got to be probably about 8 years.
Yep.
And so
That's
we
correct.
met through the gym. You were kind of a tag on to your wife, Sarah, who is a weightlifter. And that's how she and I got connected. We were training together at the same gym. And so we met you there. One of the things that struck me initially was that you always seemed to kind of have your own path figured out a little bit. Everyone else that I met at the gym, their significant other also worked out there. And in your case, you were, you could take it or leave it as far as CrossFit went. You weren't really super concerned with that anymore. While the rest of us in that circle were still very heavily into competing and training and trying to be the best we could be, warriors at 32, 33-ish years old, still thinking, not that we could go to the Olympics, but then we had a shot to do some real damage on the platform. Did you and Sarah train at CrossFit together how did you guys meet? I mean, I know you met in med school, right?
So we met when I was in residency. We actually met in the hospital setting and not in the gym. I was an intern and she was a newly minted PA in the cardiothoracic unit. And we met, it was, I think, fall of 2009. I had just taken a in-service kind of like yearly update exam, and we were out with our friends, which happened to be like the entirety of the, residency program, and also like not just ortho. It was like gen surge people, neurosurge people. I guess in the late aughts, it was still very much it wasn't internet based. We were just like hanging out with the people that we saw all the time.
It's a regular Grey's Anatomy episode.
Yeah, but without like less handsome, a lot less sex, and everybody was tired all the time. But yeah, so we met there. I had always been in the gym or working out, like it was a large part of my life up to that point. I had never done CrossFit or any like collegiate or high level like sport because it just wasn't a focus of my early youth. That being said, I really enjoyed it and I found a sense of calm in the routine. CrossFit was more me just trying something different as opposed to the regular Globo gym. I enjoyed the community in Philadelphia, so a lot of it was Sarah knew people at our Philadelphia CrossFit gym. I showed up, and those people, as it turned out, many of them also worked in the hospital and so on and so forth. So it was like this intermeshing of professional life and personal life. And when we came here to Denver, we just kind of followed through on that and it kept going. I would agree with you that it never was my hard priority. I did it because it was something that I had always done since the age of maybe 13 or 14 when I was in the weight room for like winter track. I did school and then I worked out and then I went home and it was just the flow of life at that point. My real goal was just to stay healthy and be a little more active. I didn't use sport as a method of achievement externally. Like it was cool. I thought it was great when I could bench XYZ, but it wasn't something that I necessarily had a drive to go, compared to other people. It was great while it lasted.
What I think is interesting about that is actually what I'm curious to know is how did you deal with that? Because the whole reason I got into CrossFit in its entirety is because Anna started going to CrossFit. And this is before we got married. And she was going to CrossFit. She was talking about all these guys at the gym that she was talking with and hanging out with. They went out for beers afterwards. And I was like, what the hell kind of gym is this? Right? Because I've only done the Global Gym at this point. So that's how I went.
Yeah.
And kind of got attached because, once I got there, of course, I appreciated the workouts. But it was more a concern of who are these guys that are talking to my girlfriend at the gym? Because that's never something that you really experience in a Globo Gym on a community level like that. How was that dynamic with you, knowing that Sarah had all these friends in the gym and this was a whole circle, and that was not something that you were pouring yourself into in the same way? Did you guys run into any conflict around that, or was there ever any kind of doubt about, well, how is this going to work if this is such a big part of your life?
Very, very good question. I think in Philadelphia, I never really had a lot of time to, ponder the question. So she had been going to CrossFit maybe for a year and a half by the time I was ending residency. And she did go out with her friends a lot. I mean, both of us went out with friends at that point. We were still living in a dense city. So I think nightlife was still a large part of our life. So I don't think we were very different, her versus me. I think the setting in which we did it was a little different. And I will say that, if I recall correctly, I was a little jealous of some of the interactions. As far as I'm aware, nothing ever happened. Everything was above board. But it was a lot of hanging out with the same people that, worked out together, dudes, talking at bars, interacting with women that they know are with other people. But it never weighed too much on me. I always took my jealousy and just tabled it because I didn't really have any reason to pursue it any further. I think Sarah and I, at least at that point in our life, still, discuss things more openly.
Yeah, I was just so curious about that because I was unable to do that. Not that I didn't or don't trust my wife. And now it's a different story because now she goes to the gym and I'm just like, yeah, I'll see you when you get home, right? But at that
Yeah.
early stage, I was like, oh man, I'm going to lose this girl. So kudos to you for being able to just swallow that and be like, well, I'm going to trust her. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to is if you have a good relationship, you got to trust somebody, right?
Very true. I'm not always the best estimator of humans, but I think for Sarah, I still trust her. And truthfully, it comes down to, are you in or are you not? Worst case scenario, if she truly has a change in heart and wanted to pursue a different dude for whatever reason, would it have hurt to take, that loss? Probably, but at least from my perspective right now, as a 39-year-old instead of a 28-year-old or 27-year-old, it is what it is. It's a loss is a loss. I think the record continues and life continues. I think that I loved her then, I love her now, and bigness may not have any interpretation in my mind to do with it. It's just being open to the fact that, yes, this person can hurt me, but I'm going to do my best to make them comfortable. And if that doesn't work in the grand scheme of things, maybe it wasn't meant to be.
I think that's an interesting perspective. The idea of it's just something that happens and you move on. Your parents are both first generation immigrants. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So
Yep.
both Polish?
Both Polish.
All
Yep.
right. And so were you born, you were born here though, right?
I was born here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I was born here, but they spoke just Polish at home. So I was a citizen, but I went to like preschool and kindergarten, basically being English as a second language kid.
Man, that's crazy. So thinking back on that, how much of that, well, bad stuff's going to happen, got to let it roll off. How much of that was instilled in you from your parents? And how much of that do you feel is a product of them being immigrants from a country that was up until very recently part of the Soviet bloc?
Oh, I think a lot of it is the short answer. I underestimate on a routine basis, and largely because I live in the United States, how much of myself and my kind of understanding of the world is based on a different culture. I speak Polish fluently, and for the first half of my life, it literally was half of my life. It wasn't like 10% of the time or 20% of the time. It was my mom, my dad, my brother, and a large community of Polish immigrants that surrounded us in that area of New Jersey that rubbed off on me. These weren't, wealthy people. They weren't connected people. They were scrappy survivors in the American experience. I think I could go through the foibles of my childhood for days, but yeah, man. I mean, ups, downs, lefts, rights, and everything in between. I think it was very much the nature of living with parents like that we figured it out. We made it happen. There was a certain amount of compulsion to help the people around you. So I resented my parents for a long time. For example, when they made me do like tax preparation, because my dad had a side business doing tax prep for other Polish speaking immigrants. And I did that from like the age of 5 up until end of high school, maybe first or second year, of college. So it was a really long slog of just trying to pull in a couple extra bucks because this, that, or the other had to happen, and good things happen and bad things happen. And, the American friends around me did normal American things, and I was at home, filling out a form 1040 easy for some random dude that was doing construction. I like fuck up, like the fuck did I know about like taxes? I was just I was helping out.
And I can't imagine that. At 5 years old, what were you doing? Were you running numbers at 5?
But like so basic, we're talking like addition, subtraction, but like with the assistance of mom and dad a little bit. I mean, by the time end of grade school rolled around, so like, fourth grade, basic 1040 easy, like a W-2 tax return. It's just plug and play. You don't really need much more than addition, subtraction, et cetera, the basic operations of math. To be fair, a lot of it was also interpreting, like, if someone wrote a letter to them in English, it would be try to explain it in Polish, and then they would make a decision on what to do. So it made you grow up, or it made me grow up a little quicker and serve as kind of like a middleman between two worlds, neither of which I fully belonged to.
Yeah, I can imagine that was tough.
It really was. Again, it was what it was. It was a circumstance, and I think it definitely colors my approach to how things work out. But was it easy? Probably not. I probably resented a lot of it for a while.
Yeah. How do you feel like that shaped you now? Like, what's carried over? Do you feel like that's helped you get to where you are now, if anything?
Ooh, yikes. Another good question. As a younger version of myself, I remember being extremely anxious about possibilities and, things that can happen in life, and whether that was in the educational setting, in the personal setting, most contexts. But the exposure, meaning being placed in these scenarios where maybe I wasn't comfortable, but I still found a way to function, has, made me much more tolerable of not risk, but like variability. Whether it's medicine or just assembling a life and kind of guiding household goals, it has made me accept that not every surgery is going to work out perfect. Not every investment's going to do great. Not every part of my house is going to function or last forever. But it's okay, because quintessential, tomorrow's another day. I get to start over, choose my actions, and progress in whatever way I think works to my benefit, or not. If I feel like I need to take a break, I take a break. So
it sounds like resilience in a nutshell.
Yes. If we were going to summarize it in one word. Yeah.
So growing up in that environment, and you're around, a lot of Polish immigrants, you also have some American friends from school. Did you notice big differences between home life? Did you go and hang out at your American friends' homes? And was there a big difference between what you experienced in the home, how you were parented, anything that was remarkably different from the American experience?
I don't think I noted, tough, because in retrospect, I probably didn't have as many, super close friends in grade school, because we were a tight-knit, immigrant family, and a lot of the time I spent outside of school was with family or simply attending to responsibilities in that social group. My parents hung out with other immigrant friends of theirs, so a lot of the parenting that I saw was similar, although the few instances where I had friends that I was able to be invited over for a party or, to go to the pool at a friend's house, it was very different, because I just recall there being many more things like physical things in households that were American or like just coordinated things, For example, when my parents had furniture, for the first like 10 years of my life, it was literally used furniture from construction, like other people immigrants that did construction. So they would, know houses that they were flipping or turning over, and it was just like used shit. It was like super ugly, like flower patterns that nobody else wanted. Or like, even with the updated furniture that's in my mom's house now was like discount warehouse furniture that was like just good enough. We'll throw a soft like blanket on it, and it's hard as shit. It's like basic, like it feels like you're sitting on cardboard. But we never had a lazy boy, if you will. So it was different to see that with my friends. It was never a good option to refuse a request from my parents, and not because like I was physically harmed. Yeah, there was an occasional spanking here and there, but I was never like beaten to a pulp. There was never true physical violence against me, but there was always a stern threat, like if you don't do what I want, you personally will not get what you want. So there was a transactional nature to a significant portion of our interaction as, parent and child. Even though I'll say it, I love both of my parents. They are amazing to me. And I think that I have found a way to approach that viewpoint with more kindness. They struggled. They struggled a lot. These were not, they did not come up in New Jersey. New Jersey was a foreign land for them. And the amount of stress that they must have been under as like adults in their late 30s, I can't imagine. I mean, I feel stressed just like putting, my shit together right now. And I feel like I know a lot more than they
Yeah.
did. So yeah, I get it. I didn't love it, but I get it now.
Yeah, it sounds like you didn't really, even if you noticed more material things in your friends' houses, it doesn't sound like you perceived yourself as poor or less than at any point.
No. It was no, I did not perceive myself as poor, because it's odd. I think this is where perspectives matter so much. Like, the saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure. The taxes, I hated doing them, but I was making like straight cash as a kid in middle school, high school. And even though my parents like wouldn't let me buy a PlayStation or something like that, because it would, rot my brain, I could buy whatever else I wanted, like some shit like a camping knife or like a bicycle. If I wanted to buy a bike for myself, I bought a Trek bike as a freshman in college. So I wasn't poor, but I was different. And I think that influenced my thinking a lot because it made me realize that there's so many different ways to go about life that, what's a loss for someone else is a gain for others. And I think it rubs off because that kind of permutated into that perseverance or resilience that exists.
Yeah. So as you were growing up in that community and being in that tight-knit community of immigrants, was it more of a raising a child in a village, or was it more insular the way American families traditionally seem to be more and more today? Like it is the single family unit. This is the family. This is your mom. This is your dad. Did you have that feeling of a collective?
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, it was raising a child as a village to a large extent because these were like my mom to this day, although in a much more limited sense, she was a housekeeper. And this is a lady that, I mean, if she made $20,000 a year, that was a lot. But she did it the hard way, cleaning without any, like she was a solo, one woman show out there trying to scrape it together. And my dad, he had a government job, so he was probably making, median U.S. income, but like daycare was never a thing. There is zero chance that daycare was going to happen, much less things like private school, private college. So when we were young, they definitely dropped us off at people's houses and were like, hey, you're going to be here for a little bit. Mom and dad have to go, do whatever. And, we would get by. These people were extremely kind to us. They fed us. They, protected us from bad shit. I mean, I remember one of my earliest memories with childcare was there was a couple. Her name was Nadia, and his name was Henrik or Henry, and he was a construction worker, but also an alcoholic, like severe alcoholic to the point where, he would go off the rails. And again, I don't have clear images of any one thing happening, but I do remember hiding in the bathroom while Nadia basically protected two kids, that I don't remember how old I was. I must have been 5 or less, and my brother was at that point, 3, just little kids that were being protected by an immigrant woman against her alcoholic husband who was raging outside, going nuts. And like a highly, highly dysfunctional setting in any objective means. But it like we made it. Like, dude, I don't know what else to say. Like, we honestly made it. My brother and I somehow got through all that, and I, at this point, realized that it was flawed people finding a way to do a little bit of good, and I can respect that. I think, I try to be well-rounded, but I know I have things to work on, just like they probably had things to work on at that point, and I'll give them credit for the good things they did. So, it was raising a village in the weirdest, wackiest, most all-around way possible, and that kind of carried through until college and then med school.
I've always been curious about that, just the nature of, like when we lived in Denver, right, we'd walk around the lake and see the Russian immigrants. There was a strong Russian community that lived over near Sloan's Lake. Mm-hmm. And they would always be walking together. It'd be like 4 or 5 women with a bunch of kids. And part of me, they're easy to spot. So on one hand, if you're a person who is looking to target somebody, that's not a good thing. But for me, looking at that, I was impressed with how tight they seemed to be as a community and everyone kind of looking after everyone's kids on the whole. And I felt like, man, I wish we had more of that in this country.
Same. I think it's irreplaceable to feel like, and this is so true, like in my childhood, I felt like a lot of random people were rooting for me. They just didn't speak English and couldn't put in a phone call to get me XYZ to no one had the inside track on like Kaplan for SATs.
Right.
But they knew that these are kids, and these kids should be treated well because they're kids, because they deserve an opportunity, they deserve a chance. And I think it was a wonderful, albeit somewhat coarse, feeling to have. I think in this country, if we could get, and again, my mother is not perfect. She is, to this day, she prefers her community rather than to integrate herself into the greater public. But she is kind, she offers help, and she leads with that many more times than she leads with nastiness or reproach, even if she doesn't want to admit to it. Because, she's got her ways. She still, goes to church every week. That's her deal. But, she's a salt of the earth person that tries really hard to do the good stuff first. You know?
So in that community setting, I'm curious about your relationship with your dad, what you feel like he imparted to you, especially coming from a much different background culturally than your standard American background. Were there things that he imparted to you or that you picked up from other men in that community that you looked up to or looked at and said, well, I don't want to do that?
So it was definitely a mix of both. So my father, I'll start with him. He imparted a certain sense of self-worth or like self-efficaciousness that I could do things if I applied myself.
Tough love style almost.
Correct. Like, forcing me to get past some of the things that I didn't want to do, whether it was, this was based in the realm of housework, chores, yard work, technical stuff like, taxes, or even schoolwork as time went on, because he also came from true poverty. Like we were not wealthy when we were kids. My father was born in 1942 during the World War, and, home with a thatched roof and a dirt floor, and was able to make it to the U.S., get a state, a job as an environmental inspector. And, ultimately he was educated. He had a master's degree in agricultural engineering and valued a lot of that, meaning the education part of it, as his way out, because otherwise he was just a grunt from truly the middle of nowhere that would have never left. And I think that was imparted on me by him. He was not the best role model socially, and from a relationship perspective, I think he struggled with that his entire adult life. He was not faithful to my mom throughout most of my childhood. I mean, we became aware of this when we were much older, kind of high school to early college, but that was never a strong suit of his. So that was where I think I failed to learn a lot of what a healthy marital relationship or just interpersonal relationship between, a man and a woman is, because I didn't see a lot of it. He would care for us in a very platonic, like, we're a family, this is the house, we all do these things. But when it comes to showing affection, love, I would hug my dad all the time. I would he would tell me he loves me, but then he would also turn around and, be gone for the weekend because he wanted to gamble, or his big thing was he was very aggressively anti-religious. Whereas my mom went to church, so it was like the ultimate dichotomy that pulled them apart in a large sense, and I'm sure garnered resentment between them, and ultimately led to their separation at a late stage in life. Like, my parents separated, but they were in their late 50s, early 60s.
Wow.
So a sense of being a small immigrant community in this big country led them to raise us in this village of immigrants, largely who had many of the same values. And then once that was no longer necessary from a child perspective, they were like, look, we're going to go our separate ways.
We did our job.
And ultimately, we did, exactly. We did our job, and we're moving on. I think the other immigrants in the community were also, they weren't, I would say they weren't stupid people. These were all people that had skills enough to get themselves out of communist Poland, whether it was, CNC machinists, skilled factory workers. One of my best friends growing up, Arthur, his dad went to the Warsaw Polytechnic Institute, and, was a very well-educated dude who ended up working as like a handyman to make ends meet in Edison, New Jersey. So, like, I saw a lot of these men in my life take on so many different roles to push the reality forward, but also dream of other things that could have been. And that rubbed off on me to a large extent. I still dream a lot, and I try to push life forward. I think, the biggest difference between me and a lot of these guys is that I just started in a different spot. They yearned for life. They wanted things which weren't always material, but were a shot at this, a job here, a house here. They had to see a lot of possibility in the world, because otherwise it wasn't great. Imagine the humble pie you would have to take to go from being a master's in math or whatever, Jack was, to then go like install people's shower heads for a couple bucks here or there. So it definitely made me realize that there's such a breadth of experience in this world that you should approach it with a little bit of humility and just keep working, keep trying. There's always something that can be done, to better your station, just like a lot of these guys did.
And really good insight. As you came out of that, you went to college. When did you discover that you either wanted to or had an aptitude toward medicine?
Yikes. That was one of the classic immigrant foibles that was stereotypically suggested to me. I honestly didn't think of medicine in high school. I was a science kid. I loved science more than I loved, math. Math was a labor, but things like chemistry and physics and biology, they were easy for me. So when I got to college, I did very well in the beginning. And, there was this kind of underlying suggestion that was always out there, like, hey, we know you're doing really, really well in pharmacy school, but how about a doctor? And it was the path of least resistance to apply, if that makes sense. There was a program at Rutgers, and this was pure chance that it was a joint degree program between bachelor's and MD. And my history coming out of high school, so I did very poorly on the SAT I think I got like a 1230, which was not great, even compared to my friends, in high school. And, I was mortified of the idea that I would have to take another standardized test. And, I got to college and like classroom based tests, I think I got like a B plus on my first chem exam. And at that point, I basically swore to myself that this will never happen again. And it really didn't until I got to taking some of these graduate level classes. I kind of was disgusted at that first result.
Where did that come from? Where do you think that came from?
Um, Yikes. I felt
Was it a responsibility?
responsibility, but I felt embarrassed. I felt like I had failed myself. I failed my parents because, I hadn't qualified for any major scholarships. So they were essentially funding a large chunk of Rutgers University for me or helping me kind of get through those early years. So I truly felt like I had failed not just myself, but also them. And I did the complete opposite. Instead of shutting down, I threw caution to the wind. I had never been a social butterfly up until that point. So I kind of took that part of my life and set it aside and, devoted a lot, if not every spare moment that wasn't, the occasional party or beer here or there to basically getting a 90 or higher on every test I took. And it worked, which led me to apply to this joint degree program because their one qualification was that you didn't have to take the MCAT. So I was like, all right, if I'm going to satisfy my parents' desire or, kind of live up to this goal, this is the only chance I got. And it worked. Once that ball got rolling, it was very difficult you can't stop it because once you're in, and the rest was just one rotation after rotation after rotation. Orthopedics was more like I kind of hated medicine, but I liked surgery. So I did surgery, and ortho was the coolest, in my opinion, option there. So that's where I went. And truly from that moment, it was the blink of an eye. Like once I matched, meaning once I was in med school and got an orthopedic residency, that was probably one of the days where I was like, I think life is pretty much going to be okay from here on because worst case, I become a general orthopedic surgeon and I'm still good. And best case, the sky's the limit. At that point, yes, there are still doors that could open differently for different people, but you have so much, agency over your destination that like it was a tremendous relief. So medicine was more of a fulfilling a responsibility to my parents than it was a true calling that arose to me, all rooted in the love of science, because it really was, if I could go back to the beginning of college and be like an organic chemistry professor, I think I'd be a great one. I loved it. It was, a lot of these things were in and of themselves so interesting to me that they took the place of, whether it was being the cool kid, having a girlfriend, that stuff. Yes, it wore on me as I got older and like crept into my 20s. I'm like, is there anything else that I'm missing? But also like I wasn't deathly afraid of, I noticed it, but I wasn't like, if it never happened, I probably would have still been a really good orgo professor or surgeon, right? The well-roundedness did catch up to me at some point, or kind of trying to round out my life caught up to me at some point.
Yeah, I guess once you hit that point of relief, you're like, all right, I can let some of this other fun stuff back into my life.
Yeah, or just try to figure it out. Like, honestly, it was pretty much non-existent in my high school life. So once I got to a setting where I had a little bit of freedom outside of the household, these things, they're ever present. And I think, natural is probably an overused word, but it is true. It's how humans interact with humans, for better or for worse. Not to go off on a tangent, but yes, that is how medicine came to my life.
Yeah. So in that, and you mentioned putting your social stuff to the side and really dedicating yourself to the study. Did you have any, and you mentioned Arthur, who lives in Denver, but grew up in New Jersey with you. Do you
Yeah.
have other friends now who you would say you are that close to, the people that you can share the shit with, like the stuff that is not all roses and not choosing your own adventure, but the stuff that really, when you need help, do you have people that you feel you can lean on?
Yes, I think I am lucky enough to have multiple friends that truly care about me, yourself included. I would count you as a close friend who I care about. It took me a while to make friends outside of that initial kind of, again, Polish American community that I was willing to be open with about my experiences as a kid. And it takes a minute, at least inside my brain, to understand that, like, when I feel strongly about the approach to homework or school choice or savings or these kind of more not hard science or educational or scholarly thought processes, but thought processes like, hey, I enjoy concerts, or like, of course, I love chatting it up with dudes at the CrossFit gym because like that's how I interacted with men throughout my life, taking it from the perspective of like Sarah. I realized that that world wasn't my world to begin with, but that doesn't make it any less valid in my current life. Everyone has these experiences, and it's not necessarily my job to, negate them as much as it is to try to understand them a little better and see where I fit in. I think from a friend perspective, I have learned a lot as the years have gone on. It would be a very lonely world if I only opened up to, Polish American people. And I still take Arthur as a great friend. I call my brother on a routine basis. I would say like at least 3 to 4 times per week. Now that he has a kid, he does. There's this other responsibility that he needs to attend to most evenings. But it does emphasize how that familiarity with these unspoken little truths of life that I lived through makes it easier to interact with Greg or Arthur on that level, or made it easier to interact with, Greg and Arthur on that level, just because. But it would be tough. It would be very lonely if I couldn't find people to communicate with or talk with openly about more difficult scenarios. And, again, I think life doesn't have to be perfect. But part of making it better is just accepting that, yes, there is good and bad in a lot of situations. And I think you can affect and change your station. It is possible. And a lot of that optimism is derived from the resilience and keeps me going today because, yeah, here I am, doing the same thing, still plugging away, still trying to learn, still trying to, a lot of the habits that I had back then carry over till now.
Yeah, I love that about you. And the other thing that I love about you is that you are an exceptional surgeon. By any measure, you are in the top of your field. And most people, being married to a nurse myself, her opinion of surgeons tends to vary from, well, this guy's a complete ass, thinks he's God, and no one can stand him, to this guy's okay. If I had to interact with him, I wouldn't kill myself. So it's like there's a very
Yeah.
fine line, but you've never struck me as a person who is full of himself, overconfident, or belittling to anybody in any way. And I find that fascinating and refreshing to see someone that I'm guessing that probably part of it is you've been on the other side of it. You know what it's like to be at the bottom. So being at the top, you don't look at yourself as higher than or better than at this point, but you just have, to me, a better grasp of humanity's many shades. And you seem to be comfortable communicating with anybody across that spectrum.
Yeah, look, tremendous compliment. I don't know if I deserve it to the fullest extent, but yes, it is being on all sides of, or all portions of that spectrum. Have I always interacted with coworkers such as OR nurses or techs in a non-angry way? No. I would be the first to admit, like, I am not perfect. And, if I'm struggling in the operating room to make it happen, to complete a procedure the way I believe it should be completed for the best patient outcome, I am sure you could find someone to say the same things that Anna said about some of these guys in particular scenarios. That being out there, I really make every attempt to just be part of whatever clinical solution it is that I'm looking for the patient. So like, and this is kind of going off onto the medical or surgical side of things. There shouldn't be this holier than thou approach to things. There's a delineation of labor. So like, I don't expect to be putting in the IV or doing stuff like that. But like, shit, if it did come to a struggle to put in the IV, then yeah, let's get together and figure this out. I think that's where it is a little bit of ownership, responsibility, and experience trying to do the absolute best for every single person that I interact with in a medical way. And especially like once that hat is off, all that stuff, man, that's me doing ortho. I don't want to be the dude that tells people how to, cook their eggs in the morning because I have an MD after my name. I really don't. That's not my goal. I think it's just another thing. It's a real experience that made me different, extra degree, but that's all it is. It's truly just an experience that gives me some more perspective on certain situations than other people that I come across with. And
you do a really good job of recognizing and appreciating that in others, though. Even with the doctors, many of the doctors I've interacted with, they just kind of carry that air of superiority around, even in fields of study or, whatever it might be, that they literally have next to no expertise in, but will tell you the right way to do X, Y, or Z. I know you know guys like that too, but you not being like that was one of the things that really opened my eyes because, of course, meeting you, that was my first thing is, oh, this guy's probably a dick. That's why he's not here in the gym hanging out. But no, you were just an awesome dude who had better things to do with his time, and I appreciate that.
Just different shit, man. It's I love you, Anna, and yeah, I would agree. I couldn't see myself that way. Do I have opinions? Sure. I'm sure Sarah would say that I voice my opinion a lot, but I'm not.
There's a difference in voicing your opinion and enforcing your opinion.
I would say yes. That's very true. I think I've noticed that is a clear delineation between how people interact. I don't want to be an enforcer. I think very much so. I try to look at what is right instead of who is right, especially in medicine, because and I'm not the most published dude. Even the most published guys out there, there's a issue, and that issue has its own life that is not controlled by any one person. So experience in medicine has taught me a lot of a lot of things, and humble pie has definitely been one of them. So I try not to overstep when I know that I don't have the ultimate knowledge of what's going on.
Yeah, man, I love that, looking at what is right rather than who is right. I think in a lot of cases, there's a lot of people out there, myself included, who could benefit from that way of looking at things. So thanks for sharing that. So now that you are accomplished in your career, you have the means to do more or less what you want to do with your life. As you look forward and you think about, all right, what now is my motivation for getting up in the morning? What do I want to leave behind? Even if you're not thinking of it as a legacy, but what type of value do you want to give to the world as you go forward? What's important to you? Where do you find your mission and purpose?
A phenomenal question. I think when it comes to purpose, I think it is, for me, situationally dependent. Medicine has been such the lion's share of what I've done for the past 15 to 20 years now. It is a core of what I try to do on a daily basis. It still motivates me to, for example, reduce suffering, correct mistakes. Like if there's a whole host of things that can happen, and life a lot of times leads people into the office because something bad has happened. I'm not meeting people because they're having a wonderful day, right, in the orthopedic office. So it is purposeful for me to meet them, and not always. I can't solve every problem, but I can guide them towards better. Whether that's through meeting them and giving them, good advice and assessing their situation well, or through surgery, which in and of itself is wild to think about. Like, you can internally change someone and make them better than they were before you started. It's pretty crazy. And I think that that has been a long-standing driver of what I do, even if my job from a logistical perspective, like, I work as an employed physician, so there's a certain amount of control over my practice that is always surrendered. But that doesn't that doesn't matter because the core of it is still changing, or guiding people towards a better situation. Mm-hmm. And I think that's priceless. I think on a personal level, outside of work, I have struggled a little with purpose because I never saw, and I still don't necessarily see myself as a arbiter of what that's supposed to mean for the greater public. Like, my basic purposes are still basic purposes. I like spending time outside, and whether that's fishing, hiking, whatever, I enjoy doing that. I still try to be healthy, even though I have, through my own physical ailments, stopped CrossFit, et cetera, et cetera. I try my best. I think life in general is still inherently valuable to me. I just don't feel like there's a step off where, if something happens, I'd be like, fuck it, this is it. Like, I can't, this is not for me. I just enjoy being and trying. Whether it's, through education, scholarly stuff, all this stuff. Like, the purpose in my personal life isn't as grand as, I guess, the purpose in my professional life.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Will and I actually had this conversation. We were debating whether or not you could count your job as what you see as your purpose. And he cited surgeons as one example where, yeah, that legitimately could be because you are truly giving back to someone and making their life better. You're doing something for someone that is not going to directly impact you in a positive way, right? So it's different from someone who's doing a dead-end job that they hate and they're beating their head against the wall every day. Not having another type of purpose or mission that they're focused on is going to lead to a much more depressing and lonely life. Whereas someone who is doing that, your downtime or your personal time is more of a decompression and a reset from the stress and constant, I don't know, do you have a cortisol dump every time someone comes in and you're about to go into surgery? Or is it more like adrenaline, like, hell yeah, let's go?
Oh, dude. Sheesh. I'd say for the first 5 years of my independent attending surgeon career was probably a cortisol dump. But at this point, it's more of a calm, not adrenaline. I'm not getting pumped to go cut on someone, but I'm ready. And it is a structured sense of purpose that's compressed into an hour or two, right? And that's wonderful. I mean, it is.
Do you get into that flow state? Are you just in the zone and
sure,
boom?
Totally. And I could cite specific surgical examples, but also just say, yes, it is definitely, it does boil down to a reset or kind of reorganization in your mind of all these basic principles, even if you're not discretely thinking about them, like the anatomy, the surgical technique, the incision placement, the suture, all the, whether it's a hip fracture or, an ankle fracture, or all these different things that kind of come up, yet they still have this orderly kind of progression that you can walk through and you can be safe, you can improve people for the better with what you do. So yeah, I mean, I think at this point I'm much more calm. It tended to be more of a cortisol dump. So yes, my personal life has largely been dude, I just need to stay healthy, take a minute and reset and, get back to it. I think I'm also very much a pattern-driven individual. So my routine, I don't need a lot of change. It doesn't
bother you to be in that same rut or sequence.
Not at all.
I would call some people call rut. It's just comfort for you.
Correct. It's a sense of predictability in some way, and it frees me up for the oh shit moments where if I see something rare that I have to troubleshoot, or if there's a complication that is occurring that I have to divert my attention to, it just frees up that frontal cortex to go address things. So a lot of these others, I could eat the same menu for years and it wouldn't bother me at all. Probably not be nutritionally great, but I don't need that excitement.
So you mentioned fishing, and last time we went out to Colorado, we went out to Steamboat and enjoyed a day walking along the creek and throwing a line in the water. And I've personally, ever since, I still have, I have that hat that I bought while we were there and came back with the full intention of gearing up and starting that. I still think about it regularly. I still haven't found the time to go buy the gear, much less actually go fishing. But for you, I know you send me pictures of fish you're catching, places you're going.
Yep.
What has that done for you, finding that as a hobby?
It's like a different flow state. I think it lets me practice adaptability, which in a weird way, it makes me feel so satisfied when I could figure out how to turn a shitty day into a less shitty day. If I'm catching absolutely nothing and it's been, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I can make a few adjustments. I can, change the setting, walk further down the river, and be successful. It helps me feel like I'm accepting what the universe is giving me and just being part of it. Like I'm functioning as a part of the world around me. And it's great. I try to either turn my phone on silent, even though that may not be the best idea if Sarah's waiting at home and becoming frustrated because I'm spending too much time fishing. But it's a true source of relief for me because the cortisol is just not the same. It's more like, man, I am driven to do this. Some of it may be the variable ratio of reward, similar to gambling, but I'm not losing money. I'm just like gaining the experience. So it has been a wonderful, wonderful hobby to find. I thank the pandemic for kind of giving me some time to get better at it. And yeah, it is a flow state. It is that practicing of adaptability that really kind of gets me into it more than like, I don't go fishing on like popular rivers when it's busy. I'm usually bushwhacking through waist deep weeds somewhere on a creek. But it's great. I love it. I don't know what to say.
Yeah,
Like
it's
just
the process, right? It's like, yeah, if you want to go and fish a stocked pond, that's one thing, but the part of the process is going out there, finding it, cutting your own trail, and hitting some water that no one's hopefully hit for a while.
yeah, yep, exactly. And again, like, and if you get bored, just stop and reset and look around and take a minute. And I think that even without, and I go alone. I'm alone 99% of the time out there, but it doesn't feel taxing. I'm not stressed when I'm out there. I feel happy because I get the opportunity to just be a part of it, respond in a way that fits the moment. I take a beer with me. I just put a beer in my pack, and if it's like slow or I'm really not getting anything, then great. I crack the beer and I just stare. And it's still a
Gorgeous.
great place to be. Yeah, it's still fucking great. Haven't found much that beats it recently. I think it was a great find, and I think I do need to temper my expectations with like how frequently I can go, but like I'll always try to be out there. It's super, approachable. I think I'll probably be doing it forever at this
Yeah,
point.
man, well, I just want to thank you for reintroducing me to it because even just talking to you now, I'm feeling a little itchy in my skin, like I need to get out there. So at some point,
Yeah,
man,
yeah, yeah.
once I get my stuff together, I'm gonna hit you up and we'll either go out there, we'll go up to Wyoming, do some stuff out near Jackson or something like that. But it really is a great way to just connect with the environment around you, be in pretty much silence aside from the sounds of nature. And it's amazing how
Yeah.
rejuvenating that can be, even for just an afternoon.
Love it. Love it. It's yeah, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel better than I do at work. So, so I highly recommend. And when it comes to fishing, it's just one thing, right? Like when Justin brought the bow and arrow, I got one. I still shoot, although not as commonly because we have three dogs that love to chase the arrows. Getting out, like changing it up a little and being outside has, I've learned over the past few years that has been a tremendous benefit for me that I don't know if I would be able to replace any other way.
Yeah, man, really good insight there. I 100% agree with you there. I want to thank you so much for your time. I'm so thankful that these are not billable hours for you because I wouldn't be able to afford it. But I just want to thank you for being so open and sharing not only your history and your past and what's made you who you are, but also going forward. Plenty for us to take away and think about how we can think about the world as what is right rather than who is right and
Yeah.
look at things more holistically. And then, of course, you'll never find a bigger advocate than me for getting out in nature and just letting that refresh and revitalize your soul. So we're definitely simpatico in that.
You're welcome. For you, always free.
Okay.
And truly, if anyone wanted to hit me up, I whatever time I have that I could be of usefulness to friends or people that wanted to talk, I'm available.
Yeah, you're one of the most generous people I know, and I sincerely mean that. That's not flattery. That is something I've seen and witnessed firsthand. So I'm just grateful to count you as a really good friend and thankful to have you in my life.
Love you too.
So last question, and this is the root of what I'm asking everybody. This is the root of the whole thing. But if you could go back and give advice to your high school self based on where you were then, what you were struggling with, your biggest fears, all these things, and based on what you know now and how things have turned out, what advice would you give yourself?
I would tell a younger Bolek to relax and believe in yourself. Life is very long from a objective standpoint, and I think that relaxing and taking that time to appreciate any experience, little, big, whatever, is so key in growing and understanding and being able to just find comfort, find a way to fit in that it's indispensable. I continue to learn how to do it better. And if I could have relaxed a little bit when I was a kid, I probably, who's to say, I might have lived longer. I don't know when that date's coming. But, I think, believing in myself and relaxing would have been the two highlights. A lot of the stuff that I worried about in the past just wasn't that critical. It was more about staying in the moment, that resilience, that perseverance, and the rest is just kind of the flow.
Yeah, man. Very well said. Very well said. So far, every person I've asked that question to, they'll give their response. I'm like, yep, that too, that too, that too, right? There's so many things that, damn, but at that age, of course, I wouldn't have listened to any of it. I probably would have
None.
I probably would have done better listening to it from somebody else, even from myself. I'd be like, yeah, get out of here. You don't know anything. Like, there's a lot to be said for enjoying every day for what it is, not living for the goal, but enjoying the milestones and the stepping stones that get you to each point. And remembering that the goal is not the end. It's just the beginning of the next phase.
The next checkpoint.
Yes, sir. Hey, Bo, thanks again for your time. Sincerely appreciate it. And man, look forward to catching up and hopefully throwing some lines soon.
You're welcome, Tom. Always happy to see you. I will do my part to find time to get out there or to have you come out here. So.
All right, brother. Until next time.
All right.
Love you too. See ya.